which was the first producer of grade 4 heroin in the world, 93%. The Taliban, in their wisdom, had implemented, with the support of the United Nations, the most effective anti-drug eradication program in UN history. They were congratulated at the General Assembly. Actually, shortly after September 11, the production had fallen by more than 90% at 150 tons, and now it's something, and then immediately when US troops came in, the whole production flared up to historical levels and beyond, and I think it's something of the order of 6,000 or more tons, and the United Nations has served to camouflage that. Now, let me, this progressive consensus, and which include a lot of people. Some of them do it because they want to toe the line with, with the leaders. Many of the leaders are co-opted, or they don't have an understanding of the details and the seriousness of this military agenda. I can also tell you that everything is centralized in one location, which is US Strategic Command headquarters in Nebraska. Okay, that is where everything takes place. All the air defense system of NATO, the United States, Israel is a junior partner in this whole process. They can't wage a war without the green light from the United States. Okay, but maybe they will get the green light. Okay, because as I mentioned, they like to make other people do the war for them. That's why they manage. That's an instrument of conquest. And the same thing with the French. The French are doing the work of the Americans, and in fact they're losing all their sphere of influence in sub-Saharan Africa. So this area which I just described, plus the area of North Africa, extending it into Central Africa, that is the area now where we see an expanding war theater in 2 or 3 overlapping regions. The operations in Mali, you send in the Al-Qaeda and then you send in the French. You control both sides again, and ultimately use this as a pretext to destabilize a democratically elected government in Mali, okay, which is an ancient civilization. I mean, in fact, all these countries have thousands of years of history. Now, let me conclude, because I have to, and I'll conclude in a few minutes. There are 3 elements of propaganda. Rainer wrote this afternoon, I think his presentation reveals how propaganda functions from within organizations. Okay? There's a propaganda within. In other words, within NATO, within the governments, within the parliaments, within the financial establishments, that somehow they believe their own lies. And they have to believe their own lies that they say, well, yes, it's collateral damage, yes, but it's all for a good cause, it's democracy, we're spreading democracy, and they repeat it ad nauseum, they actually believe in it. They are exercise of internal propaganda taking place, okay? Which, in the United States they call it the top off, which stands for top officials. Top officials from military, civilian, municipal, business and so on, and they meet together and they simulate attacks on Iran or some other country, and then they say, well, what do we do in the case of a terrorist attack, etc., etc. And then it's the whole notion of demonizing people of Muslims, for the simple reason that the Muslims are the people who inhabit the countries that own the oil. Okay? That's if those countries were occupied by Buddhists, they would demonize the Buddhists. That's the only reason we demonize Muslims. It's almost 70% of crude oil reserves, and consequently, this is one of the objectives. Is the battle for oil. It's not the only one, it's an entire process of conquest, of destroying institutions, national governments, and impoverishing people beyond bounds, either through warfare or through the subsequent intervention of the International Monetary Fund. The World Bank is even worse than IMF. Okay? Now, so there are three areas of propaganda. One is internal propaganda from within, which we don't know too much about. The second has to do with the tangible media propaganda, which appears persistently in the mainstream media, and when you read the Frankfurter Allgemein or Spiegel or the New York Times, you get that, even though there's some element of information there, but it conveys a consensus, the global war on terrorism, responsibility to protect, and it invades people's minds, and ultimately they may not believe in it, but if they don't believe it, they might lose their jobs, or they might lose their friends, or their wife, or their, you know, that is how it works. It's consensus, it's building a consensus. And the important thing for us is to break that consensus, because it's a very fragile consensus. The discussion on that, the most insidious element of propaganda is that which takes place within these so-called progressive organizations. How does it work? I'll mention it in a nutshell. Many of these organizations are funded directly by the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the McCarthy Foundation, all elite foundations, not to mention the Open Society Institute, and very often they don't know about it. I can say that most of these, the Occupy movement is funded by foundations, Anonymous is funded by foundations, many, and then you have Otpor, of course. It's a Serbian organization which now is involved in the revolution business, Canvas. And what do? They go into countries and they advise the protest movement. Now, I can say, and we have to be very careful, but if you look at the situation in Egypt, I'm not questioning the protest movement. It has very strong popular foundations. I'm questioning the insidious role of selected organizations and leaders. MI6 has been infiltrated by MI6 from, for more than 30 years. The April 6th movement was in liaison, the student movement was in liaison with the US Embassy, and Kifaya, which in Arabic means enough, is funded directly by US foundations, and they met up, in fact, even before this occurred, with Condoleezza Rice, when she was Secretary of State, and then subsequently with Hillary Clinton. So that again, that is the logic. You support Mubarak, you support the opposition to Mubarak, you create conflicts, and ultimately you dictate regime change. It's part of a very carefully thought out intelligence operative. It's very complex, and but I think that what we have to do is, first of all, we have to educate our grassroots, but we have to start pinpointing people in the left who are lying. Okay? Pinpointing the people in the left who are lying. And I would also say that we have to pinpoint governments who claim to be leftists, but who are in effect, I won't mention the names of the countries, but in effect obeying the imposition of neoliberal economic policies. Thank you very much.